Hello everyone, welcome to the second week of Majoring in the Minors, a weekly series where we cover the events surrounding the North American Academy scene. As the week concludes, the league is relatively even. No team stands without at least one win and one defeat each. This week, I'd like to explore a team that I believe contains many superlatives. That team would be FlyQuest Academy. To be honest, before this split, I would not watch each Academy game, and FlyQuest Academy would be a team I frequently skipped. They were a team fighting for a playoff spot, and I wasn't particularly interested in any of the names in their roster, except for maybe Triple. I wasn't really interested in the main team either until Solo joined, but when I once again watched FlyQuest Academy climb 2-0 in standings and subsequently drop down to 2-2, I knew I wanted to shine a spotlight on them. So I spent some time watching each game from FlyQuest Academy last split, and what I found was shocking. I will talk about each player from top to support in order, starting with FlyQuest top laner Revenge. I know this is a spoiler, but I'd like to say in advance that I'm criticizing players, not people. This isn't a personal tirade. These are conclusions drawn from analyses based on past gameplay and individual performances. Therefore, it should not surprise you when I say Revenge is the worst top laner in Academy, and it's not even remotely close. It's impossible to interpret statistics without context. As an example, if an AD carry has the lowest CS per minute in the league, but he played Senna a disproportionate amount of times, that doesn't necessarily mean he's bad at farming. For a direct example, Lorlo has the lowest CS per minute out of all top laners in Spring 2020. However, he also has the highest kill participation percentage. Therefore, we can conclude that Lorlo spent a lot of his time team fighting as opposed to farming, not that he's bad at farming or sidelining. In Spring, Revenge had the lowest KDA out of all starting top laners. He was placed on Aatrox, Set, Ornn, Mordekaiser, Gangplank, and Irelia. Tied at 6 with the smallest champion pool out of any top laner. He only had a relatively okay kill percentage at 61.5%, but had the second lowest CS per minute at 7.05, only 0.06 above Lorlo's 6.99. This might seem like I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but let me break it down. Revenge is getting out-farmed, dying a lot, and isn't substantially contributing to his team outside of lane to make up for this. Furthermore, while his gold share is relatively low at 6th, the people that are lower than him are Fudge, Lorlo, and Brandini, each players who need no introduction. Beyond just these numbers, I'd like to show you some especially incriminating evidence. Usually, I make my own spreadsheets detailing every statistic I will typically use for these videos, and the numbers you see come from that spreadsheet. In Spring, however, I didn't watch every game, therefore I didn't make a spreadsheet, so these numbers are coming from Leaguepedia. There is a very glaring statistic I want to show you though, which wasn't cataloged in Leaguepedia, so I set out and watched each and every game from FlyQuest Academy in Spring to come to an answer, and oh boy, did I get my answer. In the North American Academy Spring Split of 2020, Revenge had a grand total of 23 isolated deaths. That number is absolutely insane. Revenge had a total of 64 deaths, so therefore, 36% of his deaths were while he was on the weak side of the map alone. To be fair, top laners and supports each have a disproportionately high amount of isolated deaths relative to the other roles due to their nature as a split pusher or counterpiece. Just because a player has a high amount of isolated deaths does not make them a bad player. But there are so many games Revenge single-handedly loses the game because he gets curb stomped in lane and caught in side lane. What further exacerbates this statistic is the player with the second highest amount of isolated deaths on his team is Triple, who only comes in at 7. Revenge is consistently having a difficult time not dying in side lanes, or to early game ganks, and judging by this weekend's games, where Revenge lost both games, it does not look like it's changing. Revenge can still turn his season around, but he needs help immediately. He is likely in need of a positional coach who will help him learn to side lane in a competitive environment. Revenge has never competed in amateur before being picked up for Academy, and it seriously shows, as he fails to understand fundamental differences between weak side and solo queue as compared to in a competitive league. This is an extremely important concept that's hard to articulate to someone who has never played competitive League of Legends at a relatively high level. From a personal perspective, when I played high-level amateur League of Legends, this is the concept I also struggled with, and it took me a lot of time to understand how different side laning is compared to in solo queue. I know that it sounds extremely condescending to talk to an Academy player like this, and I don't intend to sound that way, but when I watch Revenge play, I empathize with how he's feeling and what his thought process is. But this line of thinking is continually failing him, and he needs to adapt quickly in order to save his season. In the jungle, FlyQuest Academy has Fnatic, who is a veteran in the Academy scene. Fnatic's debut was in 2018 on Optic Academy, and while he looked relatively mediocre there, he has developed into what I believe is the best jungler in Academy. Fnatic's early games are extremely good, and his unpredictable pathing makes FlyQuest Academy the most threatening team in the early game. FlyQuest Academy have the third highest gold delta at 15, 100% first blood percentage, a 75% first herald rate, and a 75% first tower percentage. These statistics are insane for early game. Furthermore, while junglers with relatively comparable statistics like Hard have solo laners like Zion Spartan and a Blaze Olive, Fnatic only has Revenge and Triple. In stark contrast to his top laner, Fnatic has never died isolated throughout Spring, which further shows to emphasize how intelligent Fnatic is as a jungler. There's another statistic which is especially important, and that is that Fnatic is the player with the highest kill participation percentage in the entire league at a massive 92%, 2 full percentage points higher than second place Nick Smithy, who only has a 90%. And to top it off, Fnatic has a middling CSD at only negative 2.75, with third lowest goal share for all junglers at only 18.5%. All of these numbers are a lot to take in, but to keep it brief, Fnatic has been crushing every single early game and has given his team massive advantages while developing himself into a support-style jungler come mid to late game. His early games are extremely explosive, and this was true in Spring too, where out of 18 games I recorded FlyQuest Academy is having 9 favorable early games, 5 average early games, and only 4 bad early games. This is based off team performance, not solely jungle performance, but typically, good early games are very reliant on jungle pressure, as it's the part of the game where the jungler's impact is the greatest. It's very hard to look good as a jungler on bad teams, but right now, Fnatic's biggest competition for best jungler is Xmithie, Contracts, Onda, and Anori. Among these, only Contracts can rival Fnatic's early game, and Contracts is doing it with superior players. Additionally, Fnatic is much more controlled as a player. While Contracts has a tendency of dying randomly at inopportune times that force runner thieves to cede objectives, Fnatic avoids dying isolated from his team. Contracts may be objectively doing more in some cases, but Fnatic is doing relatively more with less. Furthermore, Fnatic has a diverse champion pool. In Spring, he's tied for second with the highest number of unique champion picks in the jungle, and in Summer, he's played a unique champion in each game so far. Overall, Fnatic's numbers are off the charts. He is by far the most important player on FlyQuest and is likely the best jungler in the entire league at this point. FlyQuest Academy's mid laner is Triple. For those who are unacquainted, Triple is an Oceanic import and was one of the best mid laners in the OPL. He won the summer split last year and represented OS in the 2019 World Play-ins. His performance at Worlds was mediocre, but by all means run-of-the-mill for wildcard standards, and they did play spoiler to Unicorns of Love. In North America, Triple is excellent in lane. While he is draft resource heavy and the overall team composition is molded around Triple's champion pool, mostly control mages and utility mages, statistically, Triple is great. He has the highest CS delta at 15 compared to all mid laners in the league. He has the highest KP percentage for all mid laners, and he has a shiny KDA. However, with a relatively high gold share, I began to question things, so I decided to find a statistic that wasn't recorded anywhere on the web. I calculated the damage share and the damage per minute for mid laners with the top 4 gold share percentages in the league, and these were the results. Triple has the highest damage share out of these 4 mid laners, with a seemingly middling DPM. DPM is relative to the total game time, and FlyQuest has the lowest game time out of the entire league, so this DPM is actually the highest relative to the actual game time. Therefore, Triple's gold share is actually very well warranted. One final asterisk is the fact that these statistics are also skewed by team picks. But out of these 4 players, only Phoenix has picked a support mid in Karma, and while Mash has picked Senna, it was an actual AD carry Senna. This one game does skew his statistics though, due to its low damage output. So Triple statistics are really clean, the top of the league in fact, but there is one stain on his amazing performance, which is the eye test. Triple's teamfight awareness can be extremely poor.
Too big, gonna line it up. Oh, does get the double latch stun as well, but Triple just eating so much damage. Still the flash out is gonna put a significant amount of damage down. Winston may be caught, but he dashes around. Oh goodness, Dokla opening it up. Triple's already dead. No cleanse from
Paranoia is going to be dropped. Fnatic flying in. He is exhausted. Yuumi looking to make the disengage as Alorum tries to fight into the back line, but he's just not fed enough. He's going to be...
There is one specific play I'd like to dissect and hone in on, because it's likely the most egregious example of mispositioning in Triple's recent catalog. At Dragon, after winning a small skirmish, FlyQuest need to take this dragon in order to deny TSM Ocean Soul. After poking out Evolve's Cassiopeia, Triple tunnels onto Traits' Tahm Kench instead of realizing the wider picture at play. Evolved is flanking on Cassiopeia, and with no wall, Triple will not be able to deny this flank while his frontline is focusing on securing Dragon. Even if Dokla wasn't teleporting, the presence of Cassiopeia would cause Triple to need to stop DPSing and reposition. It is much better to reposition now than later, since the only target that's in range is Tahm Kench. Furthermore, FlyQuest should know that Dokla is teleporting somewhere, even if they don't know where. If Triple had positioned closer to his team and away from the flanking enemies, he could have been in a much better position to fight. Instead, he gets collapsed on by both Evolved and Dokla and is forced to crush into his front line as opposed to expanding the team fight, which would allow more space for him and Wild Turtle to play with. Thankfully, these things are extremely fixable with coaching. Triple very clearly has great mechanics and is a fantastic laner, but he can sometimes struggle with execution and where to apply them. Triple also plays very well with Fnatic and has a high first blood percentage of 75%. While Triple plays in lane for a lot of the game, he does occasionally roam, with great success. Overall, he's a fantastic player, and is an essential piece for his team with an absurdly high damage share percentage. FlyQuest Academy's AD carry Mash is a conundrum in himself. He has the highest KDA in the entire league, a relatively low gold share, mediocre CS delta at 15, and relatively low damage share, which is skewed by the one Senna game he played. If you remove that game, you get a share that's more in line with other ADCs, but still relatively low. Mash is not bad by any means, but describing him is difficult because he is not a very impactful AD carry. He is good on weak side, very good actually. He had an infinite KDA before his Senna game, where two particular players might stand out to you as negative gamers. Mash's positioning is very good actually. The 2 times he did die were not his fault at all, and were consequences of poor teamfight execution from his front line. In spring, his statistics were middle of the pack for nearly anything. KDA, CS per minute, gold per minute, kill percentage, kill share, gold share. Mash is somewhere between 4th and 6th every time reliably. There is one statistic that Mash leads in, however. Unique champion picks. Mash has a wide champion pool. Having the widest champion pool as an ADC a lot of the time is like being the best at holding your breath without knowing how to swim. Sure, it can be useful, but it's not in an environment where it would be especially useful. I feel bad for not being able to go incredibly in depth for Mash, but I really have so little to say. I think his laning is pretty good, but it's held back by a big problem. What a fantastic segue into FlyQuest Academy's support, Big. Big's last spot was on Optic LCS's 2019 roster, where he played with Dokla, Meteos, Crown, and Arrow. If you exclusively looked at the present form of these players, it's the most mind-blowing thing ever that this roster made playoffs. While I thought Big was quite bad on Optic, I did appreciate one thing that a lot of people missed. His tank positioning was really good when very few support players would position properly on tanks. Naturally, this caused Big to die a lot, and look really bad if you didn't actually watch the game, but this guy was insanely good at teamfighting on engaged tanks. Big and Arrow as a lane were relatively solid. Not among the higher half of LCS, but they weren't awful like FlyQuest's bottom lane. I was a little sad to see him go, because I knew he was bad, but I did think he brought something unique to the LCS. This changed the split in Academy. His laning is fine, probably lower half but passable. His stats are okay, his KDA is middling, and his KP is also mediocre. But where Big looks absolutely terrible is his team fighting. His Nautilus, a champion he is typically quite good at, looked absolutely terrible against Dignitas, and he would engage at awful times when his team clearly couldn't follow up. I can understand someone like Pume making these engages, but Big, the person who played in LCS for years, seriously? These are extremely basic mistakes that should not be made by someone with veterancy. Furthermore, Big's tank positioning has gotten a lot worse, and while I've been critical of supports in the past for being way too sheepish in their positioning, Big is much too bullish now, and very often dies when he doesn't need to. Big's statistics may look quite good relative to other supports, but in reality, Big has a lot to work on, including which champions he chooses to play. In FlyQuest vs TSM, Big picked Bard, a champion notoriously difficult to play. Bard in FlyQuest's composition is actually really good. Aphelios and Bard can be a good lane, and Bard is a great pick into Tahm Kench, but Aphelios Bard is one of the more difficult lanes to execute relative to the brain-dead engager enchanters that are in the meta right now. A massive part of Bard's kit is the use of his ultimate, and Big's Bard ults were really bad.
But the triple ready with the Emperor's Divide. Evolve's going to have to flash out of there. Does get it late, but he gets the stun down first. Big is going to miss the Tempered Fate and too late to get away, but he does zoom off with the Sand Soldiers as Big ults himself. Interesting play.
This particular play is worth highlighting because of how indecision seriously screws FlyQuest. Before setup, FlyQuest should know that both Kindred and Varus don't have flash. Big is literally standing right next to TSM's flashless carries, while Revenge has first roam onto mid. Triple is currently being collapsed upon by Evolve's Cassiopeia. If Big literally just Bard ults the TSM carries and maybe Tahm Kench, Revenge will have time to close the gap and engage onto the flashless backline as Wukong, while Fnatic and Wild Turtle reposition for a fight. Instead, FlyQuest play for the objective while they have a gold advantage. Big decides to Bartle for the objective while Triple is wildly out of position and unable to fight. TSM is reconnected at this point, and when fighting from one direction against an Aphelios and Azir, Cassiopeia always wins these. This misexecution of Bartelt results in an awful fight that loses FlyQuest control of the game. I have no clue why FlyQuest are playing for the objective here. Items don't look great, but Big literally lets TSM set up for a team fight in front of his face instead of just initiating a fight. Furthermore, the Rift Herald being low HP is actually extremely good for FlyQuest, and while I see why they're cutting away from the threat of TSM, Fnatic being able to utilize Trundle passive here for this teamfight would have been extremely useful to further his survivability in the 4v5 as Revenge out-rotates Dokla. Instead of just fighting the 4v5, Big lets Dokla close the gap, lets TSM position without flashes, and uses his ult at a time that was extremely unimpactful instead of separating TSM's carries. Big needs to avoid playing Bard. I know that seems harsh, but Big's career is on very thin ice at this point, and he should not be playing champions that are absurdly hard to execute with like Bard. Big should stick with what his strengths are, because he is becoming a liability to a team with 3 pieces that work very well together. FlyQuest's drafts are actually quite good. They're basic, but they do make sense in how they counter the enemy, mix damage, mix scaling, and fit together. While this criteria is extremely basic and should be considered the bare minimum for draft, it's honestly shocking how many teams consistently screw up these basic points and end up with some truly terrible drafts. FlyQuest's drafts get a big thumbs up relative to Academy. Their team has a clear identity which makes executing these drafts very easy, and I'm happy they don't try to reinvent the wheel like other teams. The only thing I'd really want to change in draft is putting a higher priority on drafting junglers that synergize well with Triple's pick, as many of these jungle mid 2v2s look quite weak relative to their competitors. And if you want to set up your primary carry for success in Triple, it's worth it to give more resources in draft to his right hand in Fnatic. While bad bottom lane combinations should certainly be avoided, it's not worth it to ensure a positive matchup for bottom lanes such as Bard Aphelios at the cost of having a mediocre mid jungle in Azir Trundle. I also think that Fnatic is one of the few Academy junglers who I would like to see more Lee Sin from. His mechanics on that pick are quite impressive, and Lee Sin famously slots into many mid-jungle combinations quite nicely. Overall, I really do like FlyQuest Academy. Watching Fnatic in Triple is a lot of fun. Mash isn't bad either, and even though he's been around so many places, I think he's shown a lot of improvement. Revenge and Big can turn their careers around with a little work, especially Revenge, who has very identifiable things to work on. FlyQuest have some insane potential on their hands, but it's really up to them in order to shape these players into superstars. It's very rare to see a team that has pieces that exhibit such potential. That's it for this week. Before I leave, I'd like to shout out one person who did both the thumbnail and a lot of graphics for this episode, and that would be my good friend KingMe. He's a very talented graphics design artist, and I'm a big fan of his work. Recently, KingMe released a marketing pitch for FlyQuest called BQuest, and if graphic design or FlyQuest is something that interests you, I'd encourage you to check it out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.